Hello, everyone. How are you? I'm very excited to be with you here right now. This is the beginning of a new episode of Data Science Office Hours. I hope you are still with us. I know it's been a long time for this episode to be happening, but we're very excited to be with you here right now. And we're going to talk about something very important, and that's version control. So I think it's only going to be Kristen and I. So we're gonna have a short discussion on what's version control or experience with it, and then we can get some questions from you and just maybe answer them. So Kristen, if you can start this up.
Alrighty, awesome. So personally, I didn't learn about version control in academia, neither. So my bachelor's degree is in math, my master's degree is in statistics. You know, I've said that before. So I certainly didn't learn about it in academia. However, I talked to my husband before hopping on, and his degrees are in computer science, and he did learn about version control in school, but he didn't learn about Git. So the first time that I heard about Git was actually not in my first job. So I was building models and had, Excel files like up to version 42, and it like wasn't something that we even talked about. And I went to my next job, and when people brought up version control, I didn't even know what it was, and they were talking about all these different tools that we could potentially use and trying to distinguish between them, and like I had no clue. And so where I am today is I still don't consider myself I'm absolutely not an expert, but we have an enterprise GitHub account. I use SourceTree because I prefer that. I tried GitHub Desktop. To me, it wasn't as intuitive as SourceTree. It makes collaborating so much easier. Like the benefits, actually, just today, even somebody came and asked me for an old data set that was from a third-party vendor, and I had since, the data set had come back to us in 6 different pieces, and in Python, I had put all the pieces together, and then I used feature tools to do some feature engineering and had done like a million different things with this data set, right? And somebody says to me today, hey, can you give me that old data set? And what they meant was like before you played with it. And I had no idea where this would be, but I had my code up on GitHub, and I was able to just like with the push of a button, remake that data set and send it over to them in 2 seconds, which like if I wasn't versioning my code, like trying to navigate files where you have like millions of Excel files stored in a million different folders, like that like wouldn't have worked. Like I wouldn't have been able to deliver this, I believe, if I wasn't able to just go into GitHub and find the piece of code and run that quickly. The other big benefit for me is like when my boss goes on vacation, all the code that he has, if something needs to be run while he's gone, I can very easily go and grab that and run it. And I don't even need to know, his code is pretty well commented in case anything goes wrong. But most of the time it's like, oh, I'm just going to open up this thing that's his and run it. And that's fine. So like I said, not an expert, but that's, my experience and how I'm using it today. But I know that you, Fabio, have much more experience and use it much more extensively.
So, okay, so my first encounter with version control, and this is weird because I did study computer engineering, and I graduated from computer engineering. I did not see anything about version control in school. It was not, I don't know why. I have no idea why I did not even heard of it. I heard it from a friend that was using it for like, he discovered it from some reason, And he was like, "Hey, this is very cool," but I had no idea what it was. We didn't use that in my school, and I don't know why. So just gonna pass that. So I think in my first job, um, that was like 3 4 years ago, something like that. It was like I got there and I got a job like a backend developer, but I was actually doing like data science, but it was not the name of the thing there. And I had a lot of things to learn at that moment. And one of them was they told me, okay, so we're working in Git to be able to collaborate and work with more people and stuff. I was like, what's Git? It's like what's that all about? So I entered like from zero, and I learned a lot. I learned a lot because I got very interested in the field, and I was one of those persons that were creating like the file version 1, file version 2, file version final, file version, this is the actual final, file version now for real final. And so it was very hard. I mean, if I think one of the things here that we're not used to understand like version controlling is because we're using a lot of formats that are not suitable for version controlling. And one of the examples of this is if you're using Word or Excel, you may think that these are like text files, but they're not. They're saved as binary files. So it's not easy to. I mean, if you have a Word document with the word hello, and you save that and you version control that Word document and you change it, you will not see the change in the Git in the Git page or console because it's a binary format. So Git works great with text like plain text files, and that's the best for programming. I mean, if you're programming, you're using like .py files or .r files or .java or .c or whatever, and those files they're actually text files, and those you can use version control with them. So I think using Git is very close to your start in programming. So why is it important for data science? And we're talking about version control here as a whole. I mean, I think what a lot of people think when they hear version control is like, okay, for like Git and code, and that's important. But right now we even have version control for data, we have version control for models, and a lot of different things that are important too. I mean, I don't think this is the core of this talk right now, but so you have to be aware that the things we're going to talk today are very close to controlling the code you have. But there are also ways to control your data, the version of your data, and the version of your models. In the controlling of the versions in the code world, what you do is that when you start a Git repository, what you do is that you create a lot of metadata about of your code, and that metadata is controlling every piece of that file. That means that it now, if you add a space, if you change a character, if you change a line, if you add a new line, if you erase a line, so you know what changes you're doing, and it gives you more control. And it is actually is you could think of it as a stopper for some things, but it's a good stopper because normally when you're working, you're used to do a lot of stuff and then just click save and that's it. But when you're using Git, you have to add piece by piece what you're doing because you won't want to create a new version that's completely different from the last version. Because that's not the way we work in Git. What we do is that we have a code that does X, and we want to improve that X to like X plus. And in that X plus, what you're doing is that you're actually changing bits of it, like parts and stuff, and you can track these changes. If you change if you just select all the file and erase it, and then add a new file, you're doing nothing. It's like the same of having like final version 1 and 2. So what you want to do with Git is that you want to commit, and that's the name we use in Git. You want to commit a piece of code that means something. And those commits you're creating are changing a part of the code, not the whole piece of the code. And when you do that, you realize that you're working in a more controlled in a controlled environment, that you have control of what you're doing, and you know if that people working around you are in that same control, they're working with the same controls as you, so you know they won't mess up what you're doing. And this is very important. If you're working with Git and you're working with a team, they all need to know Git. If you're the only one who knows Git, it's going to be useless, because if you are using this commit stuff and doing all the things that we will mention in this conversation, and they're just creating new files or erasing all of your content to create a new piece of code, then it's going to be really hard. So one of the things you have to be aware is that you need to create an awareness of version controlling in your company, in the developer team of data science. Okay, so Kristen, I'm talking a lot here, so maybe you can join right now and just say something.
No, yeah. So yeah, as you were talking, my thoughts were definitely commit early and often. And then as you were talking too, the other thing that I thought of is we you have to be very careful of the file structure that you use and the naming convention that you have for your code so that you can find things later. So for us, you know, every single piece of code that we commit starts with the Jira ticket number. So that, because obviously if we then lose sight of or have trouble finding it, we can go back into Jira. I think that's all I had to add from listening to what you said.
What's Jira? Because if someone have no idea what's Jira, maybe they can understand what's Jira.
Okay, yeah. So there's many different systems that people can use for tracking work, but you know, at the company I'm at now and the company that I worked at previously, so for the last 6 years, we've been using Jira. And what that means is either if a stakeholder, you know, is trying to get work prioritized, or if we're creating tickets internally, basically every piece of work and the whole backlog of things that are expected are in Jira, and they all have a number. And under that number, there can be different tasks. And so that ticket will be filled out with who it's assigned to, and originally it'll be unassigned. But you can assign that ticket to somebody on the team, and it has a reporter, and it has a description, and sometimes a due date, and sometimes, you know, some measure of the amount of work that's expected, whether this is like a small size ticket or an extra large size ticket. You know, and then you can use these to sort of work in, like some people use these to work in an agile fashion, but you could also use them, you could also use Jira ticketing and like not be working agile at all. But basically you can track the tickets from, you know, this ticket was created, this person wants this thing. They'll get a notice when it's in progress. You know, you may move it from in progress to blocked because it's dependent on somebody else doing something. Or, you know, when you finish that up, it may go into review and somebody needs to review your work before it actually moves into done. And if they find a problem, then it goes back to in progress. But basically, so it's just tracking. It's a way of tracking the flow of like the complete backlog and what's on deck and what people are currently working on.
Awesome. So, and yeah, so normally it's a good piece of software that you join with the Git part. It's like it helps you to have even more control of your code. But it's not extremely necessary. I mean, if like it's very common, and I will agree that it's a good, mm, like a good addition to your workflow. But if you don't have it, you can still work with Git by itself.
You can live without
Because
it.
yeah, I mean, so, and what's a normal workflow for data science and Git? I'm gonna just talk about my experience. So the place I'm using Git the most is with my open source code, Optimus, and I'm working here with my dear friend Argenis, and he's in Mexico City. I'm in Monterrey. So is I mean, we talk through code. I mean, I talk to him via WhatsApp too, but we talk through code. And what does it mean? When you add something in a Git repo, you have to add a message of what you're doing and what this piece of changes are actually doing. One short
I actually
recommendation
don't think
here.
you have to. I think I accidentally committed the other day with no comment and it let it
No,
go through.
yeah, you don't have to do it, but it's
You
very
absolutely
important.
should never commit something without a comment. I just wanted to clarify that I have done it and it's possible you just don't want to do it.
Yeah, it's possible, but don't do it. Because I mean, it actually depends on who you're working with, because this is a very just, I mean, you don't have to create a long description for every commit. And this is one of my recommendations, is to have a very short description of what it does. You don't have to be like, this commit, I created it yesterday when I was at launch, and I thought like, oh, this is a very important addition for the code, and you don't have to create a whole story there. No one will read it. What you need to do is like to have a very short description in present tense. In Git, we add comments in present tense because we're answering the question, what does this commit do? And when you do that, you have to answer, add a new piece for the model, or the uh, changes the way that the file the art file is reading the data, or improves the speed of the code, or add a functionality to the function name X. That's all you have to do. It means like a very short, like to the point description of what this is doing. And and the first part that we're discussing here right now is like the the most important part of it is like the commits. It's like when you change the code, but there's much more things. And so normally what you will be doing is like you will be working with something called a remote. And a remote in the Git or the version control world means the code that is in the cloud, like in GitHub or in your server. And that's the code that's running. That's like the production code. So normally that's called the master branch. If you have, we're talking about Git here. So if you have this master branch is in production, so you don't want to mess around with this master branch. So if you don't want to do that, what you do is you create something called a develop branch or develop branch. In this develop branch, what you do is you change the code, and you change everything, and you discuss with the people in the company and in your team about this code in the develop branch. And when everyone is okay to like merge this code into the master branch, then you do it. And this is very important because you're not killing the application that is running right now. And normally this takes a lot of more effort, like creating tests. And you have to create tests for, and when you create or change code, this test has to run to the develop. And when you're sure that every test is first, you have to create this test were thinking, what does the user, I mean, if it's a web application, what does the user can, like, how can he kill the application, and think for him. And if you're doing data science, you have to think of all the possibilities that can happen. What if the data is coming in this form? What if we have missing data? What's going to happen if the data is big? What's going to happen if we have streaming data and something crashes? So you have
If
to
the
do
model
all of that.
assumptions no longer hold.
Yeah, all of that. So you have to put all of that assumptions in the test section. And when you change the code, what you want to do is to have a way of testing the code you have there uh, to the develop branch. And when you do that, when everything is okay and when everything is checked, then you merge the code. Um, I mean, there's something bigger called Git flow, and in Git flow you do so much more stuff than just master and develop. You have branches for hot fixes. There are like bugs that, and these bugs, they're not going to develop, they're going to master, but you're testing the hot fixes. So because I mean, this is something important, because Git should not be a stopper for improving your code, and it should not be a stopper for actually solving an issue in real time. I mean, if you have to talk with everyone in the team and they all have to agree to solve an issue that's not working for your system anymore, it's going to be a stopper for you. So you have to have a way of actually solving stuff in real time, and those are called hot fixes in the Git world, in the Git flow world. You even have something called features. In feature, you add something to the code. Maybe you fix something, maybe you add any functionality. And the last part of the Git flow is called a release. And a release is gonna change the version of the code. How do you know that? Like, I mean, if you have WhatsApp or Instagram or Facebook, and you go to your App Store or Play Store, you're gonna see some numbers there. It's like version 12.3.24, version 1.2.3. This means that this is a release for this code, and they're working in something called SEMVer, or semantic version. And semantic versioning means that if you change the last number, like you have three numbers, if you change the last number, it's a minor change. If you change the number in the middle, it's like I mean, like, sorry, the last one is like a book fix, something like that. The middle one is like a minor fix or a minor change, and the last one is a major change. This is what we're calling iOS 10 is just released, iOS 11, iOS 12, and you expect a lot of changes there. And this is the same in your code. They're actually using Git. I mean, if you think about it, Apple is using Git to create the iOS, and Facebook is using Git, and all of these numbers you're seeing here are actually the release they're creating. Normally, a release contains a lot of features, bug fixes, hot fixes that are happening there, and it's very common that for some reason, if Apple releases today the iOS 12, in a few days, it's going to be some bugs that they didn't know, and they're going to release the 12.0.1, and that happens in like two or 3 days, and that's a hot fix, because they cannot expect for people to have that issue until the 13 version or the 12.1 version. So I know it's a lot of information, but and this is the way that software engineering works. And if you want to be a good data scientist, if you're not coming from a programming world, you need to be aware of these terms and this subject, because it's gonna be I mean, if in your life as a scientist, when you are improving your career, like you get more like a better job every year, maybe this is gonna be more and more important. I mean, maybe if you're like starting something, maybe you won't even use Git, but believe me, when you're doing like
it's coming for you.
Yeah, it's coming for you. I mean, if you're working for a big company, it's coming for you. So, Kristen, so you told in the beginning that you were not aware of all of these terms, and then you learn them in your work. What was the part that was like the hardest part for you to understand about Git and version controlling?
Oh man, like I'm going to be completely honest. I think when I first downloaded it, right, because I watched sort of a tutorial and I was like, okay, I know I need Git and that Git is different from GitHub, but like I really didn't get when I was setting up the systems that like I needed to have a local repository that I was going to then push up, like just the way that all the pieces worked together and pointing to, the correct file place from source tree, like looking in source tree, it wasn't intuitive to me that I was like, oh yeah, I need to point to the directory where I'm going to store my code and I need to set up a file for that. Like really stuff that I look back now and it's like, well, of course, like that was the stuff that tripped me up, because especially once I got into source tree, like it's a very intuitive UI. It's like it's got a button, it says pull, it's got a button that says push, it's got a button that says merge. Like it's like very, it's very straightforward, but there were some really simple things that conceptually tripped me up. And I've taught other people on my team how to use it too. And I actually see them going through the same things. Like I know I'm not special and that I'm not like the only person who hasn't gotten this. But yeah, I see other people being like, oh yeah, I need multiple parts to this. I need the enterprise GitHub. I need source tree. I need, a folder that's where I'm going to launch from. Like I can't just launch, Jupyter notebooks and from like the Anaconda navigator, and that's not hooked up to where my local repository is. I have to go into the Anaconda prompt and change directory to where that file is and launch Jupyter Lab from there if I want to see my code that I'm putting up onto the enterprise GitHub account. You're muted still.
So
Hope it wasn't profound.
no, and what Kristen says is very important, because you need to have a platform in some way or another. I mean, you can use Git through like terminal and stuff, but you're gonna be using a limited version of Git, because right now with this platform like GitLab or Bitbucket or GitHub, or there even platforms you can install on premise. I mean, if you look on GitHub, you can find like something similar to GitHub, but it's on premise and you have to install it, and it's like with Node.js, something like that. So that's important, because Git is all about collaboration too, and collaboration with your team, and you need to have a way of discussing these things inside of the code or the repo. I mean, if you're working with Git, you won't be needing to have 10 emails to everyone talking about the code, because that should be happening in the repo for everyone to see. If you see a good repository for open source, you see that people there, they may be in the same room. They are creating issues and they're solving the issues, talking to each other through the computer, so people can understand what they're doing and why they're doing it. That's for two reasons. One, they have a backup of what's happening, and second, people can help. People can help because one of the good things about open source, and I'm just talking about open source right now because it's one of the simple examples of using Git in a very easy way. You have, if you have a discussion with your teammate, you're working with an open source code and you don't have an idea of how to solve it, and this code is getting popular and stuff, people can see that issue and say, hey, I know how to solve this issue. So they can help you with this. Or if you're just using Git in a private session, like for your company, it's also good to have the discussions there, because it's normally like 5 people or 10 people are in the same project. And it's not okay to have discussions offline with every one of them and then just solve the things right away because that's lost. I mean, I cannot remember when I'm talking to everyone in my company, and it's always good to have a backup of the issues we were facing when solving a specific problem for the code, and in the issues section or in the pull request section or in or somewhere inside of the repo. And I think I mean, you don't need to buy this. I mean, if you don't have the money, I mean, if you have the money, you should buy something like GitHub Enterprise or something like that. But if you don't have the money, there are ways to have an easy access of platforms you can install on premise. They're not hard to install, and you can work with Git in an easier way. And also, I would recommend to use a Git helper or Git IDE, something like that. Like a smart Git that Christian has been mentioning is good because I mean you may feel like you're this awesome programmer because you're using Git with terminal and stuff, and that's good. But I mean it's losing time because there's a lot of things are not easy to do with Git, and
I
there's a
gave
lot of
up trying to look cool a long time ago. Source tree is great. It works.
no, because when you start, like you will be doing commits and push and pull, and everyone will be so beautiful. But when you start using Git in a real team and stuff, you'll be seeing a lot of complications, and that's where these programs like SourceTree, SmartGit, they will help you a lot because they have buttons that what they're doing is like they have like they these buttons they have several comments that are like together in Git that they're doing something. Like sometimes you want to, I mean, if for some reason your code's not working anymore, but you knew it worked yesterday, if you want to have an idea what's going on and everything, is much easier to see the differences inside of these platforms, and it's much easier to revert your changes inside of these platforms. I mean, if you have to do it, you can do everything in Git in terminal. I mean, if you're a terminal geek or whatever, just do that. It's okay. You can do it, but you need to have a lot of code there. It's like not only Git commit and stuff. You're gonna have to revert and find the specific commit and the number there, and you have to copy paste there, and maybe you have to cherry pick some parts here. It's gonna be hard to do it, and
Oh
and this
man, it's
is
so nice when you see it in, in the UI. It's like it
of course.
highlights in red and green. So this, here the lines 42 through 45 were changed and lines, 61, that's a new line or whatever, and it just points out to you exactly what it is that you should be looking at.
Yeah, you can also use for the command line version Git diff, and it will be similar to this, but in an uglier version. And so one of the other good parts about using this is that if you think about when you're programming, if someone gave you the chance to choose like Notepad or PyCharm to use Python, what would you choose? You will choose PyCharm, of course, because you have a lot of help there, and prediction of what you're doing and helping with the syntaxes and the indentation and stuff. And you have to think about this when you're using Git too. So, I mean, it's okay to try to be hardcore and this hardcore programmer and whatever you think about, but you will see that in the end, you will benefit a lot from using these platforms like SourceTree or GitLab or SmartGit. I'm using SmartGit because it's the only one that I like that works for Linux, Windows, and Mac. And I used to work with SourceTree, but you don't have SourceTree for Linux, and I got very frustrated. And then I learned how to use, because you have to learn these things too. And this is the same. If you want to use PyCharm, you have to learn how to use PyCharm. But when you learn it, it's like you feel better when programming. And you need to understand how to use SourceTree. You have to learn how to use SmartGit. But find one you're very comfortable. Maybe try it, and they're all free. So you're not losing anything here. So you can try two or three of them, and when you feel the most comfortable with one of them, just choose that. And if they have a version for Linux and Mac, and you're like this type of user, is awesome. If you are using Windows and Mac, just try to choose those ones like SourceTree, and just think about your work in like in a serious way. And this is one of the things that Git gives you. You feel that you're giving importance to your code. It's not like messing around just writing stuff because you know that what you're doing someone else will be seeing and reviewing. And do that because I don't know how many times I've been in a company that someone told me you need to transform this code from R to Python, and there's no documentation, there's no controlling of the version, there's no idea of how this code was created. It's like huge codes that were created maybe in years, and you don't have anything to have an idea of how they scientists in a good team make sure that even if no one cares, if someone tells that you're crazy for using Git, just keep doing that because you're in the right side of history here.
I really liked the analogy too with the notepad and PyCharm. That was like the perfect.
Yeah. So one of the last things I wanted to say about Git, we have one question here. Is that in data science workplaces, is Git the only product for version control? What are the competing products? You have other stuff that are not that famous, but people are using them.
Stash.
Um, uh, Git, no, like you have Git, and you have something called, it's with S. I forgot the name.
Isn't it Stash? No.
No, it's not Stash. Uh, is Subversion. That's one of the other huge ones here. I mean, it's not like we don't have a standard for version control, but normally you will be using Git. But there's a lot of companies that are using Subversion too. But most of them want to migrate to Git.
Yeah. Okay. I just
So one other question is that this is not related, but okay. So are there any free online sites where I can do all the advanced coding for ML and AI? I want I want a ready to use machine for doing everything. We all want that. Um, so this is not related, but I think we can answer it because we don't have any more questions. So there are free online sites. Yeah, I mean, if you go to GitHub, and also GitHub is a great place to find like projects for working.
other people's code that's up there. Yep.
Yeah, I mean, I discovered GitHub in the wrong way. I discovered GitHub as a place to have ideas to do my homework when I was doing computer science and computer engineering. I had no idea that it was. I mean, I saw GitHub and I thought it was like a place where people put their code and that's it. I had no idea that it was using Git and controlling version or anything like that. But right now it's a lot of tutorials there, and they even have like Docker files. And if you know Docker, it's a very easy way to have an environment to replicate what they're doing there. And so they give you a Docker file. You can just install Docker and install the Docker file, and you have everything there for doing data science or machine learning or AI or even deep learning. And even you have something that there are places like something called Binder. It's very interesting, and a lot of people are using that with GitHub. And what Binder does is it spins up a virtual machine, something like that, with all the code and the installations you have to for one repository. So you can use the examples page there for working with the code. I mean, if you see something called Launch Binder inside of a GitHub account, that's a place to start. Or even Kaggle. In Kaggle, you have in Kaggle you can create like notebooks in R, in Python, and you can try other people's code. You can fork different people. Fork is a term called using Git and version controlling. And fork is a replicating the code of someone else in a specific moment of time. You can choose whatever moment of time in more commonly you will be choosing the last version, the latest version, and you can in Kaggle you have all of things installed already, so you can use that. Okay, so we have maybe you can answer this question, Kristen. Any article you recommend to read more about good practices on version controlling plus Slack for teams?
Um, so personally, I watched I audited a Coursera MOOC that was on Git. So I didn't pay anything to take it. I'm like sort of lazy in the sense that if I'm able to watch videos for something, I'd prefer to watch videos than to read. So that one specifically, and then I did actually, just there's definitely tutorials on YouTube.
Yeah, one of the things I can recommend that's a very awesome YouTube by an amazing guy that I love his videos is called Decoding Train. He's I mean if you don't follow him on YouTube, he's like the Siraj Raval for everything else. He does web application and deep learning and machine learning. He has amazing codes, and he has one course called Git and GitHub for Poets, and I love that course. It's an awesome course, and he's very funny. You will have a great time learning with him. It has everything you need to know from Git and GitHub, and is from this year. Is and he even have a GitHub repo for that too, so you can copy all the code there. So my recommendation is, I mean, I don't remember any good article from for that, but I think that's one of the
And
best
it's not
courses out
something
there.
you want to read anyways, because you want to
See,
sort of see what they're looking at, sort of where the mouse is going. It's way easier if something's animated. And so you sold that tutorial way better than definitely go with that and not the MOOC on Coursera, because mine was like a little dry. It was a little dry, but it got the job done.
yeah, there's also a course. I think you have to pay for this in data camp. It's called GitHub Git for Data Science, something like that. I think that's some. If you're paying for data camp, you have that for free. If not, you can just pay for data camp. I think there are courses for Git in every place. You have for Git courses in Coursera and EDX and and
We're
Pluralsight, and you
everywhere.
have and everywhere, everywhere.
But really,
I
just go to
mean,
YouTube.
they may not be extremely related for to data science, but I think it's the same stuff. So if you learn from, I mean, this is very used in web development and stuff, but it's gonna be almost the same stuff. So if don't get scared if they're using JavaScript and you don't understand the syntax. You want to learn the pieces that are related to Git or GitHub. I mean, don't pay attention to the code. If it's in Python and you know Python, awesome. But if not, it's okay. It's mean just don't think about the code. And if you know programming, it won't be hard to understand basic syntax of another language. But I think the same the education for Git is very easy to extend to a lot of different areas of programming and coding. So okay, so we don't have any more questions. Any closing comments, Kristen?
Yeah. Um, it really is, if it's something that you're not currently learning and you're working as part of a team, I highly suggest that you get your team excited about getting up and running on GitHub, because it does make your life easier, and you like feel that immediately as you start being able to collaborate on code. Like it really, the amount of time I save not like digging through files to find, final for real or whatever, opening it up, realizing it's not even what I want, and having to like sort by date and go, through that, like put that in the past, get up on Git, and yeah, that's my closing comment.
Yeah, and I will finish with remembering that Git is good with text files. And something weird here is that if you're using Jupyter notebooks, it's not even good. It's not good either for Git. I mean, if you're using Jupyter, you won't be seeing the changes. It will say to you, this file is binary or too large to to see. So you won't be seeing any difference. So in this week of the digest, I'm launching every week with Python and R. I talk about something that I was very interesting for me this last week. It's called Jupyter Text, and Jupyter Text can allow you to connect your PyCharm code or your RStudio code with your notebooks. And it's awesome because if you change one, the other will change. I mean, if you change a .py file, your .ipnb will change too, and this is what you want. So you can track your code, you can git control, you can version control your code inside of PyCharm and stuff, or RStudio or whatever. But you also have that on a notebook. So if you're using Jupyter and you're frustrated like I was like a week ago, when using Jupyter as the platform for Git, you have Jupyter Text now. It's an awesome platform. It's free. It's open source. It's on GitHub. So check it out. And also, I think what Kristen said was very important. Uh, you have to learn this, and if you're in a team, make other people uh, feel that this is important. And even if they don't like it at first, believe me, they will like it in the long run when they see how much work they're saving by doing all these extra steps. You're actually saving yourself a long time in when you're if you're programming. So if you want to know more about Git and stuff, there's a lot of information in the internet. Make sure that you practice a lot. Just create your GitHub account today. Just create a simple repo. You will be lost in the first part. I mean, I was very lost when I started, but just start watching some courses there. And I think even GitHub has an education site for free too. And you have like some sample repos there. So don't be scared. This is like everything is a little weird in the beginning, but you will get there. I really recommend that you don't have any fear with Git and you see it as a tool that will change your life for the good. All right. So I think this is it. Thank you very much for being here. If you're listening to this later, maybe next year or in 20 years, hello.
Hi.
And
Time capsule.
maybe maybe Git is not a thing in 20 years, so maybe this is the worst video for you in 20 years. But right now it's important. So
That'd
learn
be
it.
so cool if 20 years from now we go back and we watch this video and we're like, oh my God, do you remember when we used to use Git? That'd be
That
great.
was awesome. All right, guys. Thank you very
Bye,
much for being here with
guys.
us, and see you soon.